Good morning, everybody. Welcome and thank you for joining us for this, the last day of the Workplace and Facilities Expo's virtual festival. My name is Hugh Robinson. I'm Exhibition Director for the Workplace and Facilities Expo Ireland, which unfortunately this year cannot be held due to the pandemic. However, Workplace and Facilities Expo will take place next year on the 1st and 2nd of March 2022 at the RDS in Dublin. The virtual festival continues today with two further panel discussions. Each of these panel discussions features industry leaders and experts discussing key areas and topics, and today is no different. This morning's webinar is more of a fireside chat and entitled Creating Sustainable Wellbeing, and capitalizes on the panelists' wealth of experience. This session is organised in association with the SCSI, and I would like to thank them for their assistance in sourcing speakers and moderating the content. As well as the live panel discussions, the festival also has a range of on-demand content which can be accessed through the Workplace and Facilities Expo website. If you would like to ask any questions, please put these in the chat box and the panel will address these at the end of their discussion. This webinar will be recorded and uploaded to the Workplace and Facilities Expo website as additional on-demand content. The moderator for this morning's discussion is Patrick King, Director at the SCSI. So without any further ado, I shall hand over to you, Patrick. Patrick.
Thank you, Hugh. Thank you for all those who are joining us this morning. Again, today's session is on creating sustainable well-being. And I'll be joined today by Dr. Jennifer Hines and Sean Hogan, associate at RKD. I'll introduce them shortly, but I just want to remind you throughout the session today that we'd really love to hear your questions coming in via the chat function. So please put them in there and I'll try to integrate them into the conversation we're having today. Again, I'm Patrick. I'm from the Society of Chartered Surveyors Ireland. We represent chartered facility management surveyors, and it's an area that I find very interesting, and I'm delighted to be able to chair today's session. I'm joined by Dr. Jennifer Hines. Jennifer has several years of experience working in the area of workplace wellness, human resource management, organizational behavior, and economics in Trinity Business School. She holds a plethora of degrees and educational certificates, from a PhD on organizational psychology and behavior, a master's of education, a master's of international economics, and a bachelor's of business studies. She's been particularly involved in the area of employee well-being, looking at stress, burnout, work engagement, psychology capital, workaholicism, and employee motivation. And she's a member of the British Academy of Management Education Studies Association of Ireland and European Association of Work and Organizational Psychology. So we have an expert in Jennifer who can bring us the theory of it all. And then with Sean Hogan, associate at RKD, we have somebody who's there on the front lines dealing with client needs to address the issues of a sustainable well-being, having delivered projects certified to the highest environmental standards. Sean also leads the Sustainable Design Group within RKD. He's internationally recognized for his thought leadership on green building issues and an effective communicator. Sean helps his clients to understand the benefits and responsibilities of sustainable design, and then collaborate to identify the certification routes that they'll be able to tap into. So he'll be able to speak to any of your issues today on sustainable design, sustainable certification management, project management, master planning, and process integration. One of the things that we've done with today's talk is try to take a particular spin with regard to COVID, because obviously that's the context of today's talk. As Hugh said, normally we would be in person, but we're not. So I guess what I'd like to do is, Jennifer, and maybe if I could start with you, is maybe if you could speak, you're an expert in the area of stress and burnout, and you've spoken before about the impact COVID has had on employees. How do you think that's changing how workers and the idea of a workplace is starting to change, and what does that mean for maybe the future of well-being in the workplace?
Yeah, thanks, Patrick. So that's a really interesting question. And I think you can kind of break it down into a few different aspects. Firstly, I think in terms of productivity and the kind of the economic questions, we actually know now that people have been able to work from home, that we haven't really seen any kind of impact in terms of the productivity or the ability for people to work from home and actually get their work done, which, traditionally, organizations would have thought we need to be in the office, we need to ensure that people are in the office and working and getting it done. But now actually, thanks to technology, people are able to work, quite well from home. And then in terms of the psychological benefits from that, we know that humans are motivated by autonomy, and having that autonomy by being able to work from home, having that flexibility, better work-life balance, these are all kind of positive aspects of working from home. Now, on top of that, there are also the negative aspects of kind of feeling like you're always on. It's quite difficult to switch off, and not everybody has the same access to resources at home. So, you'll have some people living in much larger houses, or you might have people flat sharing and the likes. And, it depends on kind of the demographics within your organization, who's working in there. But I think, organizations can really look at their employees now in a very trusting way, that you can trust them to actually complete their work remotely. And this is kind of important in terms of the psychology. And organizations, I think, really need to think about this when they start talking about, well, will we bring people back to work? Because people will naturally say, well, I've been working well from home, I've been working flexibly from home, and you can trust me. And now all of a sudden, if you maybe force me to come back in, you could end up with issues in terms of motivation and work engagement and the like. And then I think, where it really crosses over into Sean's area is this idea of the impact that the organizations can have on society. So if people are able to work from home, there's less commuting, less pollution, less demand for housing in cities. And, we've known since the 90s, the government have been trying to decentralize a lot of the government, I suppose, organizations. But perhaps there's an opportunity there for other types of companies to decentralize and take some of the pressure, I suppose, off the cities like Dublin. And not just Dublin, it's the same issues happening in Amsterdam, it's happening in Berlin, it's happening, in Asian countries, even Toronto or whatever, that there's a capacity now, an opportunity for organizations to decentralize. And then another point I think is important is just from the behavioral psychology side of things. Governments across the world have spent a lot of time trying to condition people to, 2 meters distance, wash your hands constantly. And I don't think that you can just go and expect people to come back into an office when they've been programmed for over 12 months to maintain a distance. So that could be an issue in terms of for organizations. How do you undo something that's been conditioned? And rightly so, we know that we need to keep distance. So organizations will have to kind of really think about why they want to bring people back in. But that's something we can talk about further.
Great. Sean, I mean, so some points there in terms of the organizational impact on society that could be achieved. And I mean, I think maybe the first question I would, and it influences on that is, is blended working going to be a short-term or a long-term phenomena as you see it? And how is it really going to impact on the design of the workplace as we start to think about these things? Because its overall impact is probably, is this just a short-term bump in the road, or is this a real long-term phenomena?
Yeah, indicators would say that blended working is here to stay, that we'll have both the office and the home environment, and then you can pick and choose. How the workplace reacts to that is probably a good thing, in that maybe there's reduced density on floor plates. So, the 10-person meeting room becomes the 4-person meeting room. The office allows for desking to be spread out a little bit more. Now, facilities managers might have an issue that they've overbooked real estate then, and now we're looking at lost space. But I think, if the weekly grocery shop is an anxiety issue for people, then an 8-hour day in an office is going to be such a bigger issue, right? So we have to figure out a way of making people more comfortable, safer, and more secure in the workplace for the time that they're in there. So I think social spaces will grow in size, and maybe desking spaces will expand. And I think, it'll just be a little bit more fluid and a little less sort of siloed. I think that's how we'll see blended working going forward.
Okay.
I think collaboration will grow. The idea of collaborating and working, with somebody in a space will have to happen. And we see things like Unilever talking about trialing a 4-day week, or only booking a place in the office through a technology like an app, and then you have to have a purpose for being in the office. You simply can't do a commute just to fill in a spreadsheet or respond to emails. That's a task that quite easily could be done at home in a more comfortable, safer environment with less interaction.
Thanks, Sean. Jennifer, maybe just come to you on that latter point on collaboration, and sort of, in one respect, Sean's vision there is a bit of, well, you have to plan when your collaborative time is going to be, and that time management, you think about companies and innovation and that sort of natural flow of, talk of, something was discussed in the canteen. Now, how do you plan that into your day and say, okay, on this day, I'm going to be very innovative, and then I'm going to have to meet the team? Is that really possible, or are we planning for a type of people we don't have anymore?
It's interesting because I'm actually working on a paper with some colleagues at the moment, and it's about the digital workplace. And one of the things that came up were the lack of opportunities, I suppose, to sporadically collaborate in a digital workplace. And one of the recommendations that we're suggesting are kind of policies and practices in place in order to, I know it sounds awful, the idea of timetabling, but if we are going to go with blended learning and we have the office space, I see it going forward as a thing that you'll have to book, you'll have to organize, you will have to have some sort of ring fence and policies in place in order to use the office. So if you want to bring people in to collaborate, you're going to have to schedule them, unfortunately. But in terms of the digital workplace, there are opportunities to collaborate online, through these various different digital platforms, where teams can meet. And this came up in the study that people have opportunities to share notes, different platforms like Slack, Yammer, using Microsoft Teams, that people can see what people are working on. They can organize quick chats with each other and collaborate and brainstorm. But again, it really depends on, I suppose, what the organization, what they're hoping for in the future. And I think something that really needs to be mentioned when we talk about collaboration is discussing with your employees, engaging your employees, asking them what they think, what do they see in the future, how do they think it would work for them, what types of problems do they think that they will have. And then by bringing that in and the financial side together, the cost benefit analysis, I think that you have a much more likelihood of implementing something that's successful and that employees actually buy into, that they agree with and that they will use. So there's definitely scope there for collaboration. I think our ideas need to change a little bit. And I thought a lot about this, but we know humans are difficult. We don't really like change or whatever, but it takes time. We got used to paying for plastic bags in the supermarket. We got used to the nightmare now of not being able to take fluids on the plane. We get used to these things. So it's a shift, I suppose, in our mindset. So, thinking of the psychological side of things, like having this kind of a growth mindset where you're open to new ideas, but engaging, really bringing your employees into that.
Yeah. And Sean, in terms of talking with clients, and I'm sure some of them are starting to think about the post-COVID space that they're trying to manage, where does collaboration space kind of fit into that discussion that you're having with them?
Yeah, I think, the idea that you collaborate from home is growing. We've seen Microsoft announce just this week Microsoft Mesh through augmented reality. So it's almost like you're in the room. Others are looking at it differently. It's quite difficult to come up with a silver bullet here, right? Because we as a group at the beginning of lockdown, our interiors group and one of my sustainability guys put together a playbook for a return to work out of COVID, and it was almost out of date by the time we produced it, because it's moving targets, right? And it's different clients with different needs. we developed it, we produced it, but we couldn't give it to anybody because everything just kept moving about. And I think there's going to have to be an element of flexibility on a corporation to come up with strategies, because we might develop something today for return to work, we all get vaccinated, and then there's a different approach in 12 months' time, and everybody's looked at the investment they've made in 2020, and now what are we going to do? So plug and play options, flexibility, that is going to have to be key in how we move forward, I think.
I think that's like, again, we're creating the sustainable well-being, in these buildings. There's something between what you're talking about there and the planning, and also this reconditioning piece that makes me think, I think that we always thought that it would be much more difficult to get people to move, to change the way they did things. Mm-hmm. But you put in a global pandemic, and obviously people are quite quickly adapting. And, don't waste a good crisis, I think, is the old saying. So as we come back into the office, can people start to be thinking about embedding sustainable well-being into the workplace in a way that perhaps was a 5-year plan before, and maybe actually is part of a 1-2 year post-COVID bring back to the office?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Well-being was beginning to evolve and become a key issue, in terms of attracting the best staff and retaining the best staff in companies anyway. That was moving forward. This will accelerate it. And even IWBI, who brought about the well building standard, have now introduced the health safety rating. So it allows developers or owners to put in place policies and standards that can communicate back to staff that, look, it's a safe place, it's a healthy place, it's a secure place. Welcome back, with certain measures in place, and we'll all work together, but it's for the greater good. I think, that health safety rating will become a little bit more popular over the next 12 months.
And you see, and your clients are seeing value in ascertaining that for...
Yeah, we've been asked by clients to incorporate that in. One particular client has a building that's multi-tenanted. So they want to communicate out to multi-tenants, to more than one organization, that this building is safe. If you have a 6-7 story building with 6-7 tenants in it, you have to communicate that, universally to them, that this is now a safe place to return to.
And Jennifer, like, wearing your organizational behavior hat, economics hat, even, are things like these ratings, are they just a kind of a bow being put on top of, hey, it's business as usual, or are there real gains to be had for the companies if they buy into the well-being agenda and some of these health standards?
I think from the employees' perspective, what they really want to see is that the organization are actually actively doing things. So employees want to have a voice, they want to have a say in what's happening within the organization. And I think it's also really important in terms of any kind of well-being programs that they have to be bespoke, because different organizations work in different industries have different kinds of demographics. And it needs to kind of be multi-pronged towards the different types of employees that you have. And then I think as well, just in terms of having one of these quality marks or whatever, I think it'll be really important to get that buy-in from staff as to, why do we need to come back? What is it that we're coming back to? Okay, great, the building's safe or whatever, but why now are we coming back, or how are we coming back? These will be the types of questions. I definitely think in terms of having quality marks in terms of the health and safety side of things, that's really important for people. But then the next thing will be, well, why? You'll have some people who definitely want to go back to the office. You'll have some that want a kind of a hybrid model, and some that just totally want to stay remote now. And the CIPD for Ireland, so they're the Chartered Institute of Personnel Development, the kind of human resource management organisation across Ireland and the UK. The three big trends, I suppose, for Ireland for 2021 are remote working, well-being at work, and then inclusion and diversity. So how can we tackle all of these three things? So, are we going to, in terms of remote working, are we going to go with a blended approach, or are we going with people just fully working away. So just kind of that sell. But definitely, I think there's definitely, in terms of the workplace well-being, quality assurance, or any of those kinds of surveys, they are, they're a good indicator to an employee that, this organization cares, I suppose, for me.
I guess one of the things, maybe just to stay with you for a second, is I'm thinking about, we're probably we've all been working remotely, but now we're probably looking at more of a hybrid workplace arising, where maybe me and Sean are in the office and you're working from home. How do we make sure that, if we were doing this event and me and Sean were in the same room, I'd probably be going to Sean a bit more because he's in my eye line a bit, if we were talking, and Jennifer, you'd be kind of carved out from that.
Yeah.
How does, when you're creating these innovation spaces, those seem like barriers, to preventing a good kind of group cohesion or culture. How can we overcome those?
Yeah, this has come up as well. I know at the early stages of COVID-19, I think it was the likes of LinkedIn or any of the kind of companies in kind of San Francisco and that area, they were talking about, we'll permanently let our employees work from home. So then the economic question came in, well, hang on a second, it costs me a lot more to live in San Francisco than it costs for me to live in, somewhere, in the middle of America or whatever. So people then started to realize, okay, if I'm working from somewhere else, it might impact me financially. But then people started to wonder, well, how is this going to impact me in terms of promotions? Am I going to be visible in the organization? And yeah, you're touching on a point there. If you're not visible within the organization, then, and you can see Sean easily, naturally, you're probably going to go towards Sean. So that's where I think kind of policies and procedures really need to come into play here. That, after all of this COVID, we've an opportunity to collect data from our staff, to ask our staff, what is it? And then the organization can use that kind of data to make evidence-based policies and plans on how do we collaborate? What is it that we do in this organization? And maybe it's in a blended way. Maybe it's that some people come in some days, or maybe it's totally digitally done. You'll always have these barriers to change, where it takes time. There's a time lag between somebody kind of adjusting and moving to kind of using these online tools. But even people within offices are using, Slack and Yammer and things like that to post questions. So, you could be working in a building with Sean, but you may not be in close proximity to one another. So, a lot of the time, actually, you might use a tool like that. So I really think that, it'll be policies and open discussions, that formulate those policies that will really help in terms of that kind of collaboration and that communication.
Great. And I guess one of the key policies, Sean, is going to be kind of the policy around desk sharing. There have been some high profile sort of changes in approach to desk sharing being announced, and, a reduction in the number of people per desk. How do you see that playing out? And are you supporting clients in that sort of decision, and what are you recommending?
Yeah, I mean, I should just say, right, it's probably clear from my background, but I'm in the office today. So for events like this, I come in because, it's actually a treat, right? It's a treat to come to the office. And one thing that will happen is my day will be defined by my start and end time because I'm in the office. If I was at home, it could be all over the place. That's just a by the by. But yeah, I mean, in terms of desk sharing, like, and that's coming. I think it's going to be more social. It's going to be more, as I said earlier, a we work rather than a me work, and a more kind of flexible solution. But I think we have to be careful not to increase the anxiety. We move to smart technology where we do thermal screening at the front door and touchless lifts and reducing lift capacity for circulation. And all you've ended up doing is created an atmosphere that's made somebody already anxious even more anxious. So it's a very fine balance, and I think it's going to have to be bespoke, and you're going to have to talk to clients on a per client, per problem, per issue basis and try and resolve with them. I don't think there's a playbook. I don't think that exists right now.
And when a client comes to you and sort of says, "Hey, I want to reduce my office floor plate size," I'd like to cut it in half or maybe more. What's your, this, is that do you think that's a knee-jerk reaction? What are you kind of going through to help them to decide that discussion? Because I think there's a lot of people here who are the facility manager who's being told, hey, we're going to reduce this. How can they start to engage with, their boardroom or senior executives on this discussion? What would you advise them?
Yeah, I think what's going to have to happen, we talked about collaboration. I think at some corporate level, corporate real estate's going to have to sit down with the head of corporate IT, to sit down with the head of corporate security, and almost find a triumvirate task force, because we're probably not going to have a head of buildings. We're going to have a head of places, and that head of places might include the homes of the employees, because there could be security issues with people working remotely, depending on the type of work you do. So you're going to have to be more outward looking. So, and then there are financial issues, there are leases to be looked at, all sorts of maybe negotiation with developers or landlords, whatever it will be. So I think it's not going to fall on one single person. I think it's going to have to fall on a task force within a corporation or a company to figure it out. In as much as you're asking employees to be collaborative, you're going to have to ask real estate, IT, and security to be collaborative as well, and not just think about the four walls of the building.
And Jennifer, wearing your HR experience hat, how do we? I think FM for a while has been a part of of HR and talking to them, but how do we build that up, and how do the FMs who are watching this at the moment kind of push that agenda further within their organization to highlight the value of it?
So one thing I was thinking, just in terms of the hot desking, I think it's really important that it doesn't become somebody's job to just solely manage desks in an office. I think that the research shows that this kind of monotonous, boring jobs lead to ill-being in people anyway. And you don't want it to become something that's an add-on to somebody else's job, already, where they're just spending their whole day kind of trying to managing desks. So I really think that there needs to be an investment in technology here in order to manage this. Again, you're going to need some sort of clear policy or whatever on how people can book and use. You're technically trying to rotate desks. It's almost like you don't want somebody to become like a bed manager in a hospital, within the organization. And then you have to deal with people who are, but something's come up and I need this desk now. And you need to have, I think, a clear kind of policies in there. I think in terms of for the employees from the human resource management side, you're going to need to explain to them, look, we're making this shift, why we're doing this. And if you think of like the likes of, I don't know if you've ever heard of Lewin's change model, but this idea of we need to bring about a change. So we need to unfreeze what it is that we're doing right now. And we need to have an open discussion about how, where we want to go, what's our goals, and what maybe we can do in order to do that. Then we implement our change. It's the second stage. So we're working around that. And then we freeze again. So, we've established how we're working on things and we can freeze. Now, that doesn't mean that forever we're stuck in this new model or whatever. It doesn't mean that. But it means that we have, something in place now. And I think in terms of from human resource management, they're really looking at trying to build employee relations. So that will mean trust and voice and being able to communicate a clear and effective message to employees about, how are we going to manage the office now? So sorry, your desk is gone. Now you're going to have to kind of book a desk X amount of days. And I think another thing that I thought of there is, will all employees be hot desking, or will some employees maintain their desks and some people then lose their desks? And then this kind of psychology side of, hang on a second, there's an injustice here. Why does this person have a desk? I don't have a desk. This kind of struggle almost, could potentially happen. So it's really, it needs to be really clear on how we're going to manage the desk rotation. And these are the kind of issues that employees, I suppose, would have, that human resource management would be interested in. And then if people are working from home, which you kind of touched on, from the health and safety side in an office, it's great because you have your clear rules on what you need in terms of operating an office. But, many people are probably working from home on kitchen tables, or, I've heard of people working on laptops, at the end of their bed. That, over the long term, that really can't maintain operating and working like that, on a laptop. And, it's unergonomic. So I like this idea of this idea of facilities management isn't just like the building. It's everything now. It's people working from home. So it's the job, if anything, has become more complicated. So again, like trying to establish what it is that our employees need who are working from home, and recognizing the different segments, I suppose, of our employees. You may have some graduates. I'm lecturing in a university. You may have some graduates and they're living at home with their parents, and then their parents are working from home, and then they're working from home, and they're in a 3-bedroom house. How do we manage that? And effectively, the home almost becomes like a call center. So these are the kinds of challenges that organizations will face, and these are the human resource challenges.
Yeah. No, and I think that's it's so true that you've got a situation where you're trying to, like, I've relocated for doing this, so I had a nice little background, etc., and I move around the house, but it's a different sort of building now. In terms of building an understanding of that place and well-being within that place, what does a facility management individual, do you think, what's the first step they should do as they start to broaden out that brief into a wider space? Is it engaging with HR? Is it engaging with the staff? How do you think that needs to change?
I would suggest engaging with human resources first, and then human resources through whatever form of surveying they want to do, whether they want to do qualitative or quantitative research. Absolutely collect data, chat with your employees, find out what it is that they need. From the basic level, when we think of well-being, we're talking about like physical well-being, social, psychological, and financial well-being. Our physical well-being, we know the obvious ones: eat well, exercise, or whatever, but also our physical well-being could be impacted by stooping all day at a kitchen table. So what can we do as an organization to help people to work from home? We need to ask them what it is that they need. One of the worst things I think organizations can do are make assumptions about what people need at home. You don't know. If you haven't asked somebody, you don't know what it is. And I think that's really beneficial in terms of leadership and motivating staff, because it demonstrates to the employee they want to hear from me, they're listening to me, and they're trying to help me to do my job. So that's the first thing. And then I think it's really important, and research has shown this as well, that the organizational culture, that the leadership within the organization encourage people to take breaks, to have set boundaries. I'm used to working from home. In academia, that's quite normal that you would do your research and stuff from home. But I remember when I first started, I didn't know what to do. I start at 9, right? Okay. Because we're so used to going into an office, before that. So, having these kind of boundaries, and it's really important that the organization does that they encourage people to have kind of a set routine, to log off, don't check your phone at nighttime, things like Slack or MS Teams or whatever, you can have notifications popping up all night. That's not good for you in terms of your work-life balance. So, these kind of questions need to be asked. This kind of research needs to be done. And it doesn't need to be complicated. If you don't have the resources, it can be simple kind of chats or whatever. And really just trying to establish where are the employees at, and what do we need to do to get them to a point where they can have good, I suppose, physical well-being at home. Now, the other side of things is obviously the social and psychological, working from home in isolation. That's another topic in itself.
Yeah. Sean, like maybe to get you to step outside the office building and hop into the home office. what would you, if you were helping a company that was trying to blend that, what would you be thinking in terms of trying to advise, everybody to in their home office? What's some of, like, again, the design design concepts around trying to create a home office space? I mean, that's a challenge, but it's very clear that that's something that, it's going to be an extension of the building, I guess, or place, as I think you were calling it.
I suppose just first to touch on a point Jennifer made. I mean, we're working on a program level of sustainability with a corporate client for EMEA, and some of their pipeline projects have slowed down because they're looking to move away from the 1-to-1 ratio, one desk, one employee. And what they've done there is they're evaluating that, as Jennifer says, but the employees are part of the evaluation process. So there is a post-occupancy evaluation. And then to come to your point, not only are they looking at the 1-to-1 ratio, but they're looking, without being nosy, into the homes of people who are staying at home to ensure that, quality mental health, quality physical health is addressed in terms of, like Jennifer said, ergonomics. Are we seating in the right, comfortable environment? Do we have the proper desk arrangements? How can we support that? If we're going to do that, we cannot just send people off and say, you're working from home, you're no longer my responsibility. So there is an element of, if we are going to cut down on desk numbers, we are going to reduce our footprint, maybe what we need to do is reinvest some of that saving into what we can provide for our employees outside of the office.
Yeah, great.
And the other side of it, I think, as well, clients are looking at is not just the perimeter of their buildings, but the urban environment or the setting they might be in. So to allow for time when you are in the office to provide restorative spaces outside, be it, park benches, parks, walks, river walks, whatever it is, and invest in locations like that. And then find out where employees are at home and do they have similar arrangements. So there's maybe a step up in HR there that was probably never expected before. So that, I mean, you look at Google Urban in the US now, Google ultimately, previously would be sort of inward looking in that they provide everything in-house, the cafeteria, the gym, it's all in-house. They look inward and it's all there. In Silicon Valley, they're looking at creating a neighborhood. So they've not just built an office, but they're looking at building homes and parks and a transport system, and looking back out on themselves.
Great. And I mean, that definitely will change the role of somebody within FM and that collaboration within HR, and having that dialogue in terms then of the areas of well-being and sustainability, not as sustainable well-being, but as two different things. I'd just like to shift gears and sort of think about, I read recently a book called Healthy Buildings by John McComber. He was in Harvard Business School. And one of the things he was talking about was very much how sustainability sometimes is at odds with a healthy building, because of the fact that a healthy building might need more cleaning, this situation that we find ourselves in where people are worried about their health concerns. We have to have gel everywhere. We have to have cleaning routines done everywhere. Can these two issues lie well together? And can they be apart? Because obviously they were two twin track policies of buildings, pre-COVID, but are they starting to diverge?
Yeah, I think there's always that balance between people and planet, right? So when you set out to have a healthy building for the planet, and you create all these filtration systems and daylighting savings and rainwater harvesting and everything like that, that maybe sometimes what gets lost in all of that is the comfort of the occupant. So you have to strive for that balance between finding the healthy building, decarbonization, making sure you've minimized or eliminated the impacts of building on the planet, but you also need to make sure that the people within your building have a space that's been created for them for their own health and well-being too. So they're not exclusive, it's just an issue of balance.
And I think just building on that, this idea of when we're designing a building, and please, I'm not from the facilities management area, but when we're designing a building, within practicability, how can we involve our employees in what it is that they need within the building itself? What type of spaces do they need? How can we encourage better well-being, I suppose, within the building in itself? You know what I mean? Like just encouraging people to take the stairs. Simple things like this: light, access to windows. I can't tell you how many buildings I've worked in where I don't even have access to open the window. Just things like this that I think that you could get engagement from your employees from when you're making those decisions.
Yeah.
Where's that coming from, Sean? I'm thinking that there was somebody specifying at some stage, like, oh, we wouldn't want them to be able to open the windows. Jennifer may do something silly. So we kind of don't trust and this goes back to a trust issue. Jennifer, I think you started with that. What's going on there?
I think there are many drivers. It depends sometimes on, I have to be careful how I phrase this now, but developers will look to build a building and lease it or sell it as an asset. Agents will say, well, I can get you tenants, but they'll want a fully air-conditioned building. And sometimes, that, will be the driver, But we are seeing a kind of return to maybe mixed mode ventilation opportunities where, yes, air conditioning and thermal comfort is provided through mechanical systems, but then there's openable windows as overrides. That is coming back, that there is more of that. But then that has to be, sometimes you can step that up, so you can have BMS systems built in. So if the air quality drops outside, you can automatically shut the window and send a note around saying, windows are closed for the following reason. There's acoustics. Nobody wants to open a window with a bus idling outside, so it's always a balance, and it's always it's how you treat the asset, who the asset is for, what the tenant might need, what the owner might need, and you adjust accordingly, But I do think there is a return to mixed mode ventilation.
It's something that really struck me, in the whole COVID pandemic, the German parliament or whatever, Angela Merkel was talking about, like, one of the major things we need for this is ventilation. We need open windows in schools and all of the buildings. And I'm just thinking of so many offices in Ireland that don't have windows that you can open, and that's going to be one of the things that I'd imagine that people will be worried about. How do I know it's not circulating, spreading around in the building? I can't open the window.
Yeah, well, most ventilation systems have non-recirc. That's kind of how they do it now. It's 100% air intake and extraction. But yeah, to the regular guy or girl sitting at the desk, they might not be aware of that. So yeah, that is a communication issue that they can be told that there's no recirc. It's full intake, outtake.
Sean, maybe to come back to you as well, just in terms of, you talk about the developer and the full building life cycle. One of the things that we've struggled with in terms of the design team sometimes is to engage with the likes of the FM and maybe even the HR side of things at an early enough stage that, it's not just about selling on the asset; it's about the lifetime of the asset. And how do you? What role would you like to see them playing at your design team table when it comes to well-being?
Yeah, so one of the things we try to introduce is soft landings. So you bring the FM guys in as early as possible, make them part of the design process. The worst thing you can do to an FM person is to open the front door and say, "There you go, there's the keys. Let me show you how the air conditioning works." That's like, make them part of the system. Make them, have all the training embedded in, the handover policies, the health and safety manuals, have it all up front. And it's a seamless transition then from, moving from A to B or bringing new headcount into a new building. That soft landings thing is huge. If you can get a client to have FM as part of the process as early as possible in the design, it can be seamless.
And what would you expect them to bring to the table in terms of the well-being discussion at a design? Because hopefully they would, between them and the HR side, they'd understand what their teams are kind of conditioned, what the culture is, et cetera, in a way that maybe senior management, when they're commissioning a piece, may not really understand. Well, they say this, but actually they wash their hands 5 times a day, or or something along those lines. What's the
the best trick there is pre-occupancy evaluation. So let's go into the facilities you already occupy in, do lessons learned, find out the problems, find out the issues. You can do it at a 100% occupancy, or you can do it with an FM team. We can facilitate that. We've done it in the past. And it can go beyond, cleanliness or acoustics. It can go into workplace strategies, time management, overbooking of offices, whatever it might be. We've done all of that, but it always informs the design then going forward, that you can take that into, conceptual design. Maybe you're able to reduce footprint out of it, or you're able to, increase social spaces or reduce density for desking, whatever it would be. But pre-occupancy and lessons learned is always advisable.
Jennifer, in terms of coming back, whether it's into a new building or a building that's been redone, what are the organizational opportunities for the employer and how they should engage the employee during that sort of, whether it's the first time they're coming into a new building or it's an existing one? Because I think I'm struck by the amount of people where it's like, we need a new building to help us change our culture. And is that overdoing it, or is it that it's just an object within some sort of psychological Freudian idealist?
Yeah, I don't see the building as solving a culture problem, to be honest. Now, I mean, a change is good. If you're working in a really dark and dingy office or whatever, and you're trying to promote kind of an innovative culture, it doesn't exactly, the brand doesn't really match the idea, shall we say. But when you think of culture, culture, people talk about it as kind of the soul of the organization. So it's very much so people-centered rather than building centered. Now, of course, having a beautiful area to work in and, light and nice surroundings or whatever can really help in terms of lifting the mood. So, we know that culture is based on, attitudes of people, I suppose, within the organization. So if people are stressed within the organization or within your team, you're going to feel it. We know this. Lots of studies have explored contagion and crossover. Likewise, if people are in a positive mood, that's the benefit there, that can also spill over to each other. So, I mean, definitely in terms of having a nicer building, bringing people into the process. I've been, I was brought into the process of moving into a new office. And, from a personal perspective, it was really nice to be involved in, this will be where your desk is. This is what do you think when we design the office, where do you think, you would like to go, and just bringing people in on the journey, setting them up for it. I found, very, very beneficial. So, and studies have shown as well that bringing people in on the journey is beneficial. So if you're planning on making any kind of changes like that, to bring people through the process as well. But do I think that just simply moving buildings is going to change the culture? No, not if you have toxic leadership, you know what I mean, in a toxic climate. That's just going to follow, like a poltergeist into the next building.
And to come back to Sean's point about, looking at people re-entering their building, perhaps, I think, it's been, they only had a few weeks in there at any one point during the last year. And what should Sean and maybe the FMs that are listening, like I assume that, being greeted at the door with a person with a thermometer and a mask on and a white suit isn't necessarily going to make you less anxious and going, God, I'm glad to be back in the office. What are the broad principles that we should be trying to maybe create a well-being environment that's addressing stress, anxiety, as well as trying to touch on those health concerns that people have as well?
Yeah. Yeah. Firstly, yeah, it doesn't look great, I suppose. But in from the other perspective, it actually shows that the organization are taking action to make sure that nobody's coming in with a 40-degree temperature into the office. Now, you know, I don't know the efficacy, I suppose, of these thermometers. Do you know what I mean? That somebody could be coming in asymptomatic and people are paranoid about that. But if the organisation is seen to take steps, that's definitely a positive. But I think you definitely need to consult with your staff beforehand, because some will be less nervous and may be willing to go in, and you can maybe do it in a phased basis, where you bring those in who are quite happy to go in, and then that can send a message, you know, by, well, there haven't been any outbreaks. It is safe to be in work. Nothing's happening, you know, within the office, you know, after a month, you know, if you're not having outbreaks or whatever, it's, you know, that's evidence for those that are maybe a little more nervous, and you can bring it in kind of, I suppose, on a staged basis, and definitely keeping up that symbol that we're managing the building, we're managing your health and safety, we're engaging with you, we're asking you when you want to come back, how do you want to come back, and you know, it's really important, I think, not to try to, you know, force everybody back in. I think it would be unwise to try to bring everybody back in at the same time. You know, when you look at what they're doing in schools in other countries, they're bringing in half a cohort and they're putting them on kind of a rotating basis, and they're you know, rotating on weeks or half a class in at a time, and maybe that's the strategy that organizations could employ. So yeah, definitely that the symbol of the practices, you know, that we're cleaning and that we're making sure we're doing within our best capacity, we're making sure that people aren't coming into the office and spreading it. But then over time, having that evidence that, look, it's not actually spreading within the office is safe, you know, and that's going to be really important, getting that message across to people that the office is safe.
Yeah. And what? How about yourself, Sean? Like, is there something that you like? I think there's, you know, that seems like a very common sense approach. You may not be calling your some of your staff your senior and junior infants, but you know, you can probably bring in certain people who are more essential or who maybe need to. I mean, I think that's the other thing is maybe other people have a work office situation that and you lean on that. What do you see?
I think from an operational level, you also need to understand your staff and who be more comfortable coming back and who won't, and adjust accordingly. You know, we tried it last year during the summer when we eased out of the first lockdown. We brought back one particular sector, which was about 10 people. 2 of those weren't really comfortable with coming back, so that was fine. We made that arrangement, and even, you know, some things like we might see as the right thing to do might, you know, actually increase anxiety. So, you know, you'll go on YouTube and you'll see one of the social work spaces where you can book, have YouTube videos running of, oh, we've increased our cleaning standards and our sanitization policies. And you think, well, I was quite comfortable to come back to work, but now that you're persistently cleaning around me, I'm getting kind of anxious now. I was fine, you know. And that person saying, well, I'm only following, you know, the guideline and what I've been told to do in terms of cleaning policy. So it's always going to be a challenge. Like I said at the beginning, no silver bullet, but you can't do it on seniority or importance. I think there has to be a comfort and a security level attached to it as well.
I think even Mike Ryan, you know, from the World Health Organization said COVID is very much so based on an individual's risk levels. So we all have different risk levels, and for some of us, we'll feel really comfortable going back into an office or going on a holiday or going to the shop or doing, you know, different things, where some people could be really terrified, you know, absolutely terrified. And then that's very, very, I would say that is very, very negative for an organization to kind of push somebody back in that's in that kind of a state. And you have to ask yourself, you know, the economic question. How productive are they going to be? How engaged, how motivated are they actually going to be if they're in that kind of state of panic in work, when they've actually already demonstrated that they're able to work from home and that they're productive working from home? Again, this idea of trust, and, you know, we're a long way from these kind of tailor forms of management, you know, where these X and Y, you know, all employees are lazy and we need to watch them. We know that that's not true. So I think empathy is important here. That there's a bit of empathetic leadership here, that we recognize that different people have different fears, different personalities, different styles of working, and that we need to try to be, as the CIPD said, more inclusive in terms of these different aspects of people.
And maybe just we're coming near the end, Jennifer, but one of the things it struck me there is I think the likes of the facility managers are often there. Some of them are still often going back into the building and make sure that it's running. And there's probably a sense that, well, you're not allowed to be kind of nervous or have anxiety about this disease because you've got to be on you're our frontline worker. How should they be able to deal with that? Because sometimes it may not be the fairest thing in the world to them to sort of be going like, well, everybody else can work from home except for you because yours is building orientated and we need you in. Or maybe it was fine when it was just me in the building, but now that there's others coming in, yeah. How do they, as somebody it's essential to their job, but yet they may have these underlying anxieties, etc.
Yeah. I think you've touched on it, not just for facilities management. I think this is probably how teachers are feeling, or, obviously nurses and doctors kind of sign up for something that they know that they're going to be thrown into potentially dangerous situations. But somebody who joined as a facility manager didn't sign up to go into work, I suppose, and potentially become ill. Again, I would say the same for them in terms of it's the activities that you're taking, the steps that you're taking to kind of show them that, this is a safe place to work. And as facilities managers, they're involved in kind of the whole process of making the building safe. And that's why I think as well, that's another argument for bringing people back in on a more staged process, because then, rather than all of a sudden 20 people are back in the office or 40 people are back in the office, that you can bring them in a staged process so that, people like this facility manager that, you're talking about have a chance to kind of become a bit more used to kind of being around people. You're not hearing much talk about this, but I really think this idea that we've been conditioned all year to spend the last 12 months, and it'll continue throughout the summer. It's sorry to be negative with the rollout of the vaccines, but we've been conditioned to spend 2 meters, to be 2 meters apart from people, and we're not seeing people. And that's going to be a bit of a shock all of a sudden to people, to be around people all the time. And, different paranoias or whatever, I suppose, could come in. Paranoias or fear, or rightfully so. Somebody might be living with somebody with an underlying condition or something like that. So again, I would say empathy, a staged process, listening to that person, hearing their concerns, trying to find ways to manage their concerns. That's going to be really important, like the communication side of things with somebody. Unfortunately, I feel like there's almost no solution to some jobs. If you're a bus driver. Oh, sorry. Can you see me? Oh, is that happening to you?
I'm not doing that.
Okay. Unfortunately, there are some jobs. You're a bus driver, you're a train driver, or whatever, and you kind of those working in supermarkets. It's a terrible situation, but the best, I suppose, that an organisation can do is try to build that trust and be empathetic, and you lead empathetically towards those people and follow maybe a staged process.
Yeah. Sean, maybe just one of the things I'd like to come back to you is we talked about the certifications in the area of sustainability, of wellness, and you've got the Well Cert and a range of things that are coming online in terms of the leveling. These have, I think, value that the market has demonstrated. What, as a project maybe going forward and sort of thinking long term, what ones would you say, and how can the FMs who are listening, who are kind of going, okay, we're going to start this journey, but maybe part of what we need to do is get these certificates because it will demonstrate value to the buildings that we're running and what we're doing. How would you say that they should go about that? Do you have a preference on the certs that you sort of look at, or is it really based on what their clients are?
Yeah, well, I guess on a CSR level and a pre-COVID and a non-pandemic environment, you know, the three green building standards that would have been out there would be LEED, BREEAM, and from a health and well-being perspective, the Well Building Standard. The health safety rating has come along, as I said, really as a communication tool to let people know that buildings are safe and secure to enter through policy change within the building, maybe by, you know, air and water testing and increased sanitization processes. The other one that's out there as well, which I've only recently seen in the last 2 to 3 weeks, is one called the Immune Building Standard. It's heavy on the operational side rather than the design side. There's very little a designer can do to influence it, apart from maybe some infrastructural issues dealt with at mechanical electrical systems level. But it goes back again to cleanliness, sanitization, thermal screening, that kind of thing. And again, there's various levels of the standard. You can be immune strong, immune resilient. I think that's how they are, depending on how you want to look at it. But I think that's brought out by Genesis Property, and there's at least one building in the UK with an immune building standard already. So I would say on a regular design level, LEED, BREEAM, well, but on a COVID pandemic reaction, the health safety rating and the immune standard are the two to look at.
Great. Well, I'm just gonna see, we've got Kristen and Hugh there. I just didn't know if there were any questions. I'm having a bit of difficulty pulling those up, and whether there was any burning questions. I have 2 final questions for our panel, but just in case there was anything from the audience there that I can't see.
Patrick, I just wanted to apologise to everybody. This is the great thing about Teams and Zooms and live webinars, they all come with little bits of idiosyncrasies, and today this one is that the chat box has disappeared for all of us. So if you can bear with me 2 seconds, I'm just going to try and get it back, but it does mean changing the perspective for 10 seconds because we can't see the chat box. So bear with me 2 seconds. So we have had quite a few in the chat box. Bear with me 2 seconds.
Okay, maybe just as Hugh's just looking through those, if you guys don't mind, I might just ask a kind of a question about, you know, what gets I like the idea of what gets measured gets done. And I guess this follows up on you know, the post-occupancy, pre-occupancy evaluation process. But Jennifer, what do you think when a company is trying to measure well-being? I know we were just talking about the certifications there, but in terms of actually just productivity and efficiency and other things, what do you think they should be looking at, both to communicate to senior staff, but also the staff itself?
So in terms of for well-being, first, you know, your first major hurdle is what is it that we want to measure? So are we looking at social well-being, psychological, financial, or physical well-being? So there's lots of different questions, I suppose, that you could answer there, or that you could question. You know, you could put together in a survey, or do we want to qualitatively interview our staff? Do we want to ask questions, you know, within focus groups, or how do we want to go about that? So there's lots of tools that exist already out there. You know, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. So, you know, there's surveys on work engagement, there's surveys on motivation, there's surveys on stress and burnout. So there's lots of different surveys that you can use. I would definitely recommend using things like Likert scales, because you'll get, you know, much more information then when you're analysing the data. You need to have people there who are actually able to analyse the data as well. So I think what's really important first is to kind of establish a baseline of where are we at right now? You know, where are we in terms of our physical well-being or psychological well-being? And then looking at, you know, what are our goals overall? Like, what's the vision? What's the mission of this organization? What are our plans going forward? And what can we do now? What steps can we put in place in order to improve those kind of baseline measures that we have? So I would definitely look at it more so as a longitudinal project rather than cross-sectional. You know, you don't want to just measure at one point in time. You want to measure at one point in time, put something in place, you know, use that data from point 1, put something in place and then measure again and see, are we improving? How are we doing? Has X or Y improved, or has it got worse? So then we're using, evidence, data analytics and evidence in order to formulate any policies. From a HR perspective, this should be aligned, I think, with your performance management and your reward management, because that will really motivate people, I suppose, in terms of, achieving goals or whatever. It also sends a signal as well to employees that your thoughts matter. We want to collect information from you. We want to know how you're doing. We want to hear from you. Research as well shows that any kind of well-being programs, they need to be bespoke. You can't just roll out a random, we'll have yoga once a month. That's not well-being. That's not a well-being program. You need to listen to your employees, and lots of case studies as well on having well-being champions. So there are people within the organization who are not necessarily within the leadership team, but there are people who work in the organization that are interested in well-being. So it could be somebody who's really interested in, fitness, somebody who's really interested in nutrition, somebody who's interested in kind of meditation, and all of these different components, and offering kind of a multi-pronged approach to different people, so that you consider the different demographics. Somebody who's 21 is going to be very different to somebody who's 65 in the organization in terms of what they want. You're not going to say, we're doing a 40K run, for somebody who's never done running. So, we need to be bespoke and listen to our employees, but definitely, constructing good quality surveys and being mindful as well not to over survey. People get absolutely saturated and fatigued with surveys, and be seen to act as well on the data, because what's the point in doing a survey and spending 20 minutes filling in a survey and then nothing ever happens, and then people are sitting there thinking, for God's sake, they've done nothing, nothing's happened. So then they kind of lose a bit of, I suppose, trust with their staff. So in terms of well-being, I think that's really important. To establish a baseline, use that baseline to implement any kind of changes, and then measure again and keep doing it. It's not, well-being is not an end process, it's perpetual.
Yeah.
So it's changing.
And Sean, just you'd raised two real key kind of, let's say, survey points, but just evaluation points with the pre-occupancy, the post-occupancy evaluations. Are there other ones that you'd like to see being used? And obviously, I think the post-occupancy evaluation, it's said that it's probably done, but I don't know. Is it being used as much by the industry as it should be?
Probably not. And one of the reasons I want to just coming back to Jennifer, like, communication is key, because sometimes POEs are treated with suspicion, right? What do they want to know? And if I complain too much, or am I going to end up doing myself out of a job here? So, that they're always treated with some element, and especially if they come out of the blue, you've just landed on somebody. So if it's part of an evolving process and that's communicated correctly, and as Jennifer said, responses are listened to and acted on. So, pre can be about moving building or changing environment. Post might be changing the environment you're currently in for the greater good. And that needs to be communicated across for the purposes of getting the best information, and actually for everybody's comfort and security as well, that they don't feel like they're, writing themselves out of a job by going into SurveyMonkey for 20 minutes,
I know I'm going to wrap up with one last question for you. And I know for those who've stayed with us, they're probably going, are we creating a sustainable well-being model through what we've discussed? But I think what we've identified here is really that there's an opportunity to create a sustainable well-being model through the pandemic crisis and that reset, that reconditioning that's going on. So I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I maybe just ask you both to wrap up on what you think are maybe the three things that you'd like those who are attending today to take away from the talk.
So I suppose from my perspective, I think it's really important that we collect and we analyze data, and with that we make evidence-based policies and programs and procedures, and that it's perpetual. You know, it's an ongoing thing that we're doing. And then as we're doing this, we're building trust and we're communicating with our staff. So they're kind of like the three things: collect our data, communicate, trust, and build policies and programs, and use that data to help us to formulate those kinds of plans and programs. So they're the three main things on my side.
Great.
I think for myself, you know, comfort, safety, and security are a priority, regardless of your standing within an organization. You know, it doesn't really matter. That's key for everybody. I think we're in a world of moving targets. We don't have the silver bullet. We need to address each issue individually, or each client individually, or each building or corporation individually. And as I said at the beginning, I think partnerships are key. So within an organization, the head of real estate, the head of IT, and the head of security probably need to formulate some sort of task force so that we look at the issues holistically, not within the four walls, but what we've provided or what we've missed for our employees who are remote. I think those are the three key things for me.
Great. Well, my three things are have a great topic selected by Hugh Robinson and the team. Though we'd probably say, I think, Hugh, I don't know if you heard, we said it may have to change from workplace to just place as the role of the FM widens into the homes of everybody else. I think that we've had a great audience with a topic that's really identified, hopefully, with the FMs, but bringing them a different perspective from the design and the psychology of HR and organizations. And the third part is obviously that was down to two excellent speakers, Sean Hogan and Dr. Jennifer Hines. Thank you both for what's been a fantastic and more than an hour that we've been going. So for my part, I've been Patrick King, and thank you, Hugh, for the invitation to be here today.
I just wanted to say thank you to both the speakers. I found that fascinating. I think this whole area of well-being moves because there's now a greater corporate responsibility for well-being at home, and that's quite a difficult subject. And it's not just about place, and that brings in and FM property managers, whatever, will have to be thinking and considering that. And I think from over the last few days, this session included, it's proving to me that it's corporate culture and strategy that will have to drive this, and it's planning and everything that you've discussed about how the workspace will be used, not disenfranchising people just because they're fit. I'm so glad that I only organize an exhibition. So, so having said that, it will be socially distanced, it will be clean, it will be secure, and it will be everything else. But I just want to say thank you for that. Can I just change the mode of this one more? There were a couple of people who wrote into the questions, and just in case they are there, so bear with me 2 seconds. I don't quite understand what's gone wrong, but there again, I think that's a bit like the 40K run. At my age, I don't really understand technology. Bear with me 2 seconds. So we had, right, last one. Oh my question there, Jennifer.
Julie.
Could you repeat the change model you mentioned earlier?
Yeah. So Julie, hi Julie. So the change model I mentioned, it was from Lewin, and it's a 3-stage change model. And the first thing you do is you unfreeze. So by unfreeze, it means undoing everything that you're doing. And opening up for dialogue and discussion about what it is that we need to change, and kind of almost like a brainstorming type of session. And then what we do is we bring about our change, move into the change phase of the model, and that's where we're testing out our new plans and looking at what's working and what's not working. And then once we've established that, we move into the final stage, which is stage 3. And that's refreeze. So by refreezing, we now have set the policies in place. We've set the way that we're going to work through something, and now we have a policy in place or a practice in place within the organisation. Until again, change is perpetual until we need to do it again. So it's unfreeze, change, and refreeze.
Sorry, I'm just going to go back to the make sure this is. Oh, the chat's now working on the left-hand side. Wonderful. Bear with me 2 seconds. Actually, Patrick, I'll leave these to you. You've got Tim Austin and Ravi.
Yeah, so I see those two. So coming back to the opening of windows in the workplace and the ability to influence your indoor air quality, the market shows a lot of evolutions for increasing the IAQ. There's a new one. And an example we see emerging is injecting probiotics, the healthy bacteria, into the indoor air to push away the bad bacteria. Is this an urban myth, or would this increase psychological well-being for anxious employees?
Right, it's a new one on me, I have to say. But
I've never heard of this either. So
I'm going to defer to my mechanical consultants and find out more. And I actually know Tim, so I'll go back to Tim and on a separate thread and figure it out with Tim. But yeah, that's a new one on me.
Oh, could it be that Tim knows you as well and asked the question?
Yeah. He's trying to catch me out.
Yeah, when you're having your antibiotics, you need to balance it with your probiotics, right?
Yeah.
So this one's another question for you, Sean. How do you think the pandemic and encouraging people to work from home is affecting the office building design industry? Why organization owners need to keep investing in buildings for the future? So I'm guessing, what's the impact basically of COVID on the design industry, and what you're hearing from design owners, the owners about running the business, I guess, and is now, is there a glut of commercial on the market, and or how do they stay advanced? I mean, one of the things that we're seeing, at least in our own side from the society, is there's a question about, it's going to be A grade is going to be the requirement. I mean, like, there may be a bit more supply, but it's going to impact the bottom side of the grading. So that differential, people will want better supply. Is that something that you see? Or
yeah, that's correct. Better supply, but I also think there is a little bit of internalizing going on in corporations to understand, as I mentioned earlier, the 1-to-1 ratio, whether that needs to change. But there may be a slowdown, and there may be maybe not so much of an uptake, but there'll be no drop in quality. If anything, the opposite. We may take less real estate, but we want equal or better quality than we've already had.
Well, I think those are our three questions that we've now addressed. Thanks to the technical gremlins who've sorted this out for us in the end. And once again, thanks, Jennifer. Thanks, Sean. And thanks, Hugh, for organizing this.
Thank you all very much. And I look forward to meeting you in person next year.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.